Hello, and welcome to a video where we look into the new update from The Baby in Yellow. The Baby in Yellow is a game which, despite only being under an hour in playtime, is still drenched in lore if you know where to look. We'll look at the updated story in this video. While the basis of the lore remains the same, there are some expansive parts of the update which explain a little bit more about the baby and the evil force behind it. So let's just have a recap of the main game, which is essentially a babysitting simulator taking place over the course of 3 nights. The babysitter, you, must complete various tasks such as feeding the baby, changing it and putting it to bed. All seems to be normal at first, but then strange things start happening. The baby mysteriously teleports around the house and starts to exhibit very sinister behaviour. This all culminates in the babysitter being pulled into a kind of portal, and the game then ends. The update sees the babysitter having to follow a white painted rabbit in order to escape the baby. The sitter must navigate what appears to be an apartment block which seems rather empty and deserted. The baby isn't making things easy, constantly appearing and vanishing, teleporting to other areas whilst holding keys needed in order to escape. The sitter encounters a more terrifying version of the baby, but eventually the babysitter does manage to leave and escapes. So what on earth is actually going on here? In the last video we looked into some literature explaining what was behind this mysterious infant's behaviour. The King in Yellow is a book of 10 short stories written by Robert W. Chambers and was published in 1895. One of the main aspects of the book is a fictional play of the same name which drives people to insanity if and when they read it. This play features as a motif throughout the book and its 10 stories. We will just be focusing on the first 4 of the 10 stories as these provide the closest references to the game. These 4 stories are called The Repairer of Reputations, The Mask, In the Court of the Dragon, and The Yellow Sign. These 4 stories are closely linked by 3 things: the play in a book form, a supernatural entity called the King in Yellow, and a symbol called the Yellow Sign. Act 1 of the play is fairly bland and ordinary, but Act 2 is where it starts to ramp up and get sinister. The reader is essentially driven to madness. We see a book on the shelf in the game called Reputations and How to Repair Them. This is a direct reference to the first of the 10 stories in the book named The Repairer of Reputations. During the second night, we gain entry to a room which looks like some sort of ritual room, with lit candles on a table and a tape recorder set on top of it. The tape recorder appears to feature a previous babysitter talking of their experience and states that they were not the first. The babysitter then gets more and more concerned as they're speaking, almost identical to the mood of the 2 acts in the play. Act 1 is calm, but Act 2 is frantic and more horrifying as it goes on. This is what the tape says.
Snow. A curiosity in July, following such a sweet spring. It started when I took this job, but I was not the first. They are with me. Night fell the first day, and the hours dragged on. Still we cared for the child. We spoke of Hastur and Casilda in their absence, while outside the fog rolled in as the cloud waves roll and break on the walls. Oh, the sin of such innocent eyes, clear as crystal, understood by the ignorant and wise alike, more precious than jewels, more soothing than music, more awful than death. Then, as I fell, I knew that the Baby in Yellow had opened their tattered mantle, and there was only God to cry to now.
So in order to discuss this strange tape, we need to turn our attention to the 4th and final story, called The Yellow Sign. In The Yellow Sign, an artist and his model Tessie are in a library and they both end up reading The King in Yellow. Before they know it, they're reciting and discussing The King in Yellow the exact same way as is on the tape. The artist mentions the yellow sign. The yellow sign is described as being set in black onyx. It's described as being able to produce a siren call of sorts to the dark world. Anyone who is exposed to the sign is doomed, and the yellow sign is the sign of someone or something called Hastur. Robert W. Chambers' book didn't really explain the yellow sign in detail, so we have to look further into the Cthulhu Mythos to understand what it is and why it is even relevant to the Baby in Yellow. To do this, I have to introduce you to Hastur. Hastur, also known as the Unspeakable One and He Whom Is Not to Be Named, uses avatars in order to manifest. It's not really clear whether Hastur is a supernatural being or a place, but the former is more widely considered to be his true form. He hails from a city called Carcosa, which is in another dimension entirely. It's considered to be located in the star cluster called the Hyades and is situated on the shores of Lake Hali. This explains the other two books we see on the bookcase downstairs. The city is seen in this picture as featuring tentacles. This is likely why when the babysitter is being taken away, they see a sort of a globe with what appears to be tentacles around it. The most relevant thing about Hastur though is that two of the several avatars he uses are the Feaster from Afar, which is a black, large tentacled octopoid who possesses the ability to float and to fly, and the King in Yellow, in which he wears a tattered yellow mantle. The Feaster from Afar has some relevance to the game's story, as we see a mass of tentacles blocking the stairs if the babysitter tries to go downstairs. The baby seems to also have the ability to hover and fly. Another nod to the King in Yellow is the yellow crown on the baby's yellow top. Legend has it that merely mentioning the name of Hastur and being exposed to the yellow sign summons him. Furthermore, the yellow sign is the sign of Hastur. In the fourth story, The Yellow Sign, we see that Tessie and the artist possessed a clasp of black onyx, which they soon realised was the yellow sign. Weird stuff starts to happen as the game progresses, such as seeing creepy entities in yellow in the reflective surfaces around the house. Did the previous babysitter on the tape read the book and summon the King in Yellow, or was it intentionally set up as a ritual? Candles in the shape of the yellow sign and the tape speaking the words of the play in order to set off the whole chain of events. It's possible that this book here, How to Dream Like a King Volume 2, is the play The King in Yellow. Now, it seems that Hastur preyed upon people with an artistic leaning, if you like. This is perfectly captured in the case of an A. Pickman. When the babysitter is in the elevator, they hear a murmur of an individual called Pickman. Arriving outside Pickman's apartment, Alice Pickman was what appeared to be an award-winning composer who created a lullaby called The King's Lullaby. This is confirmed by a note from her father, R. Pickman. Now, this is very significant in the Cthulhu Mythos, as Richard Upton Pickman in Lovecraft's work was depicted as a painter. So this Alice is Pickman's daughter. You see, it gets slightly dark here, as Richard Pickman was shunned by his peers for creating such grotesque works, so much to the point where he was kicked out of the Boston Art Club. He created paintings of horrific creatures. Well, it actually turns out that Pickman was a creature himself, more specifically a ghoul, which I guess potentially makes Alice a ghoul too. I previously mentioned that it's possible the babysitter accidentally summoned Hastur. It could have been Alice Pickman, who started to make madness-inducing music as seen from this book here. It could be that she stumbled upon the story of the King in Yellow and summoned it. The records in her apartment seem to show some of the records being At the Shores of Hali and Cassilda's Dreamscape. These records are all based upon the King in Yellow. Pieces of the sheet music are discovered in the apartment, and on playing the tune, the baby seems excited by it but then starts crying. After finding a switch, the babysitter finds a hidden record with the completed song on it. After playing it, the babysitter grabs the key and is able to get through the locked door. What comes next are pretty much the same things as in the babysitting loop, with the baby transporting and teleporting around and exhibiting sinister behaviour. However, given that the babysitter is now trying to escape, the baby steps up its efforts in trying to prevent that happening. The whole game is geared towards bending to the baby's will. The baby, as seen earlier, makes the babysitter do what it wants in order to trap the babysitter's soul, taking the soul itself to the city of Carcosa. So, what is the baby? Well, it obviously has parents. Upstairs in the parents' room we find a talisman. A talisman is an object that has religious or magical powers intended to protect, heal, or harm. We see a book alongside it which is Talismans and Their Uses in Childcare, which gives us a kind of foreboding about the child. This is confirmed when the child exhibits strange behaviour, to the point where the babysitter has to use the talisman on the child in order to restore the baby to its unpossessed state. Again, it raises question of why all this is happening. It's also likely that the person on the tape is the father of the baby and is obsessed with the King in Yellow. Has this person summoned Hastur unknowingly, and as a result Hastur has possessed the baby? So the baby is basically possessed by Hastur. Hastur wants the babysitter to stay in the apartment so that their soul can be trapped within Carcosa. Eventually the baby, Hastur, tries to keep the babysitter there by mirroring the apartment. Literally. The record player is playing the King's Lullaby and is essentially trapping the sitter in a loop. The baby puts things like TVs in front of the sitter to try and trap them into staying, as when they look into them, the sitter gets thrown back into another loop. The sitter escapes, but the message on the screen is "Run, little rabbit. You're not the only one, there will always be more." And that's it. There's not much has changed in terms of the Baby in Yellow's background, but there were some cool expansions to the world in which this story takes place, and with the addition of Alice Pickman. The biggest question that I have is, what is the apartment block? Where is it? Is it an alternate reality where when walking through the door, they're transported to a different reality altogether? And who was leaving the paintings of the White Rabbit? Given that there is a symbol of a rabbit in Alice's apartment, that nods towards her being the person leaving the White Rabbit symbols for the babysitter. With a third update shown at the end of the game, I'm excited to discover more about the lore of this game, and hopefully it'll shed more light upon the location of the apartment. But that is it for this one. If you did enjoy this video, please leave a like, subscribe to support the channel, and comment your thoughts down below. But for now, take care, and I will see you in the next one.